The great hall of the Valkorian Empire was filled with noise. 17 different alien species had gathered under the massive crystal dome of Nexus Station. Some of them floated in special tanks, others stood on legs of various numbers. A few hung from the ceiling like giant bats. But all of them were angry about the same thing. Humans, High Chancellor Zorveth, stood at the center of the room. He was tall, nearly 3 meters, with a body covered in hard black shell. His head had 4 large eyes that could see in every direction at once. When he spoke, his words came out as clicks and hisses, but the translator device in the ceiling changed them into the common language that everyone could understand. "The humans have taken 3 star systems in the Rim territories," Zorveth announced. His voice echoed through the chamber. "These systems were marked for our future colonies. The humans have no right to them." A wave of angry sound swept through the room. The Valkyrian Empire had ruled this part of the galaxy for 12,000 years. They had conquered 47 different species. No one had ever successfully stood against them. And now these newcomers, these humans, were acting like they owned the universe. Ambassador Kelleth rose from her floating chair. Her skin was blue and covered with small dots of light that changed color with her emotions. Right now, those dots were burning red with anger. "We sent them warnings. We told them to leave. But they just smile and talk about trade agreements. Then they build more cities on our planets. They breed like insects," someone called out from the crowd. "Their population doubles every few decades. If we do not stop them now, they will spread everywhere." Representative Morvik slammed his massive foot against the floor. He was a Kashan, a species that looked like a cross between a bear and a tank. The Kashan had served as the Empire's soldiers for 3,000 years. They were proud, strong, and not known for their patience. "Enough talking," Morvik growled. "My fleets are ready. Give me the order, and I will crush these humans like we have crushed everyone else. They are nothing. Their technology is primitive. Their ships are slow. Their weapons are weak. This will be over in a month." The chamber erupted in cheers. Species that had spent centuries fighting each other now stood together against this common enemy. The humans had made a mistake by challenging the Empire. Now they would pay for it. High Chancellor Zorveth raised one of his clawed hands and the room fell silent. "The War Council will meet tomorrow. We will decide how many ships to send and which fleets to use. The humans will learn what happens to those who defy us." More cheers filled the air. Representatives clapped their various limbs together. Some of them were already discussing how they would divide the human colonies among themselves after the victory. But in a dark corner of the chamber, one figure did not celebrate. General Vrax was old. Very old. His species, the Korvathi, could live for 500 years. And Vrax had used almost all of those years in service to the Empire. His body was covered with scars from 100 different battles. His shell, once smooth and black, was now gray and cracked with age. 6 tired eyes watched the celebration with an expression that none of the other beings in the room could. Understand fear, the general had seen many wars. He had commanded armies that burned entire planets. He had watched civilizations fall and species go extinct. Nothing had ever frightened him. But now, as he listened to these fools talk about crushing the humans, he felt something cold crawling up his spine. They did not know. None of them knew. The truth about humans had been hidden, classified at the highest level of secrecy. Only a handful of beings in the entire empire knew what had happened 147 years ago. Vrax was one of them, and he had spent every day since then hoping that the humans would never become a threat. That hope had failed. A young officer approached Vrax and bowed respectfully. "General, the High Chancellor requests your presence at the War Council tomorrow. Your experience will be valuable in planning the campaign." Vrax looked at the young officer for a long moment. This one had probably never seen real combat. He had probably trained on simulators and read about famous battles in books. He had no idea what war truly meant. "Tell the High Chancellor I will attend," Vrax said. His voice was rough and quiet, like stones grinding together. The officer bowed again and hurried away. Vrax remained in his corner, watching the celebration continue around him. Ambassador Keleth was laughing with Representative Morvik. Admiral Yelthin, a serpent-like being who commanded the Third Fleet, was already drawing battle plans on a holographic display. They were so confident, so certain of victory. They looked at the numbers and saw an easy win. The Empire had 12,000 warships. The humans had perhaps 400. The Empire had weapons that could destroy moons. The humans still used chemical explosives and nuclear reactors. On paper, it was not even a contest, but Vrax knew something that the papers did not show. He knew about Earth, the human homeworld. He knew what kind of place could produce creatures like humans, and he knew that numbers and weapons were not everything in war. The celebration continued for several more hours. Delegates made speeches about the glory of the Empire. They talked about how the humans would be taught respect. Some of them discussed whether humans would make good slaves or if they should simply be eliminated entirely. Vrax listened to all of it, and with each passing minute, the cold feeling in his chest grew stronger. Tomorrow, he would speak. Tomorrow, he would tell them the truth. He would share the classified files that had haunted his dreams for over a century. He would show them the recordings that only a handful of beings had ever seen. And then, perhaps, they would understand why going to war with humanity was the worst decision the Empire could ever make. As the last delegates filed out of the chamber, Vax remained behind. He stood alone, under the crystal dome, looking up at the stars. Somewhere out there, in a small corner of the galaxy, humans were living their lives. They were building cities, raising families, exploring new worlds. They had no idea that the greatest military power in known space was preparing to attack them. Or perhaps they did know. Perhaps they were preparing too. That thought, more than any other, kept Vrax awake at night, because if there was one thing he had learned about humans, it was this. They were never as helpless as they appeared. Underestimating them was the last mistake many creatures had ever made. The general turned and walked slowly out of the chamber. His old legs ached with each step. His eyes were heavy with exhaustion. But sleep would not come easily tonight. Tomorrow would change everything. Tomorrow, the Empire would learn the truth about humanity, and nothing would ever be the same again. The War Council met in a smaller room. Far from the grand chamber where politicians made their speeches, this was a place for serious discussion. The walls were thick, the doors were locked, and everything said here would remain secret. High Chancellor Zorvith sat at the head of a long table. Around him sat the most powerful military leaders in the Empire. Admiral Yelthin coiled her serpent body around a special chair designed for her species. General Morvik occupied a reinforced seat that could support his massive weight. Intelligence Director Naxith, a thin creature with too many arms and eyes that never blinked, reviewed data on a portable screen. And at the far end of the table, almost hidden in shadow, sat General Vrax. "Let us begin," Zorvith said. "Director Naxith, please share your intelligence report on human military capabilities." Naxith stood and activated a holographic display in the center of the table. Images of human ships appeared, rotating slowly so everyone could see them from all angles. The human fleet consists of approximately 400 combat vessels, Naxith explained. Their largest ships are roughly half the size of our standard cruisers. Their weapons are primitive by our standards. They use chemical propellants and nuclear missiles. They have not yet developed energy shields or plasma cannons. Admiral Yelthin made a hissing sound that might have been laughter. "They are children playing with toys. My fleet alone could destroy them." "Their armor is interesting," Naxith continued. "They use layered metal plates instead of energy fields. Crude, but somewhat effective against kinetic weapons. However, our plasma beams will cut through them like water through sand." General Morvik nodded his massive head. "How long to mobilize for attack?" 2 rotations to assemble the 3rd and 7th fleets," Admiral Yelthin replied. "Perhaps another 3 rotations to reach human space. The campaign itself should take no more than 10 rotations. 20 at most, if they try to hide in asteroid fields or use guerrilla tactics." Zorvith's mandibles clicked with satisfaction. "Excellent. Then we can expect complete victory within. You will all die." The words cut through the room like a knife. Every head turned toward General Vrox, who had risen slowly from his seat at the end of the table. His old joints creaked as he moved, but his voice was strong and clear. "High Chancellor Zorvas," four eyes narrowed. "General Vrax, you have served the Empire with honor for 4 centuries. But perhaps age has affected your judgment. We outnumber the humans 30 to 1. Their technology is inferior. Victory is certain. Nothing is certain when it comes to humans." Vrax walked toward the holographic display, his steps slow but steady. "I have won more battles than anyone in this room. I have conquered Even worlds. I have never lost a campaign." He turned to face the council, and his 6 eyes were hard as stone. "And I am telling you that if you attack humanity, the Empire will fall." Silence filled the room. No one had ever heard General Vrax speak this way. He was famous for his confidence, his careful planning, his absolute certainty in victory. This was something new. "Something disturbing? Explain yourself," Zorvith demanded. Vrax manipulated the holographic controls. The images of human ships disappeared, replaced by an old star map that showed routes and systems that no longer existed. 147 years ago, before most of you were born, the Empire sent a survey team to explore the outer spiral arm. Their mission was to catalog primitive species for future conquest. He touched another control, and a planet appeared. A blue and green world with white clouds and polar ice caps. "This is Earth, the human homeworld. When our survey team first detected it, they classified it as a Category 12 Deathworld." Agrel Yelton actually recoiled, her serpentine body pulling back in shock. "That is impossible. Category 12 is theoretical. No known species has ever evolved on a world rated above Category 9. "That is what we believed," Vrax said. "So we sent a team to investigate. 5 soldiers, including my uncle's nephew, Private Korath. Their mission was simple: land on the planet, observe the dominant species, and return with data." The old general's voice grew heavy. Only Korath came back. Intelligence Director Naxeth leaned forward, his many eyes blinking rapidly. "I have access to all classified files. I have never seen any report about this mission." The report was sealed at the highest level. "By the Emperor himself?" Vrax looked directly at High Chancellor Zorvith. "Your predecessor decided that the truth about humanity was too dangerous to share. He believed that if the Empire knew what humans were truly capable of, panic would spread. So the files were hidden. The survivors were sworn to secrecy, and we hoped that humans would destroy themselves before they ever reached the stars." He paused, and when he spoke again, his voice was barely above a whisper. "They did not destroy themselves. They grew stronger. They unified. They built ships and weapons and spread across the galaxy like fire across dry grass. And now they are here, knocking on our door, and you want to answer with war." General Morvik snorted, his massive nostrils flaring. "You speak of ancient history. Whatever happened a century ago does not matter now. The humans are weak. We are strong. That is all that matters. You understand nothing." Vrax's voice suddenly cracked like thunder, making everyone in the room jump. For a moment, the old warrior's eyes blazed with the fire that had made him legend. "I have fought the Melvari Extinction Wars. I have led the Siege of Korthax. Prime. I have seen horrors that would break your minds. And none of it, nothing I have ever witnessed, compares to what I learned about humanity." He touched the holographic display again, and a recording began to play. A young Korvathi soldier appeared, his shell smooth and unblemished, his eyes wide with terror. "This is Private Korath," Vrex said. "Recorded aboard the rescue vessel that found him floating in space, half dead from injuries and exposure. This is his testimony about what he experienced on Earth." The council fell silent as the recording began to play, and as Korath's words filled the room, describing a world of poison and predators, of creatures that laughed while they killed and healed their enemies with the same hands that dealt death. The leaders of the Empire began to understand. They began to feel something they had never felt before. They began to fear. The recording was old and damaged. The image flickered and jumped, showing gaps where data had been lost to time. But the voice of Private Korath came through clearly, filled with a terror that had not faded even after decades. "We landed on the night side of the planet," Korath said in the recording. His eyes kept moving, looking left and right, as if expecting attack at any moment. Standard procedure. We wanted to observe without being seen. Lieutenant Gravix was our commander. He was experienced, confident. He said this would be an easy mission. Korath's mandibles clicked rapidly, a sign of extreme stress in his species. The air was wrong. Our filters worked, but we could feel something in the atmosphere. Millions of tiny organisms floating everywhere. Our medical officer said they were called bacteria and viruses. The planet was filled with invisible creatures that could kill us. The humans breathed this air every moment of their lives. In the War Council room, Intelligence Director Naxith was taking rapid notes. Admiral Yelthin had not moved since the recording began. Her serpent eyes were fixed on the image of the young soldier. "We moved through what they call a forest," Korath continued. "Trees, they call them. Giant plants that grow tall and block the light. The ground was soft and wet. Things moved in the darkness. We heard sounds, animal calls, the rustling of predators hunting prey." He paused, and when he spoke again, his voice had dropped lower. "Sergeant Mithil was the first to die. She was examining a plant when something flew at her face. Small insects, no larger than my smallest claw, hundreds of them. They covered her before she could react. Their stingers injected poison that dissolved her organs from the inside. She died in minutes, screaming the whole time." General Morvik shifted uncomfortably in his seat. He had seen soldiers die before, but this was different. This was a death caused by creatures so small they were almost invisible. "We tried to run," Korath said, "but the forest was like a maze. We got separated. I heard Lieutenant Gravix calling for help. When I found him, he was on the ground. A creature was standing over him. The humans call it a bear. It was not large by their standards, perhaps twice the height of a human, but its strength was unbelievable. It had torn Gravix apart with its bare claws. When it saw me, it roared. I have heard the sound of starship engines. I have heard bombs exploding. Nothing prepared me for that sound." Korath's whole body was shaking now. "I do not know how far. The planet has a single moon, and its light barely reached through the trees. I fell many times. The ground was covered with sharp rocks and roots. By morning, I was alone, wounded, lost on a world that wanted to kill me." The recording flickered, and the scene jumped forward. Korath looked even worse now. His shell cracked and dirty, his eyes hollow with exhaustion. "I wandered for days. The planet tried to kill me in new ways each hour. The sun burned my shell. The rain carried acid that stung my eyes. I ate nothing because everything was poisonous. I drank from a stream and spent a day vomiting from the parasites in the water." He leaned closer to the recorder, and his voice dropped to barely a whisper. "Ow." "Then I found the humans." The War Council leaned forward, listening intently. There were 2 groups of them, perhaps 50 in each group. They were fighting over territory. A river ran between their camps, and both sides wanted to control it. Korath's eyes went distant, remembering, "I expected primitive violence. Quick, brutal, efficient. That is how most species fight. Attack, defend, retreat when wounded. Preserve life when possible." He shook his head slowly. "Humans do not fight like that." His voice grew stronger, filled with a kind of horrified amazement. They ran at each other with weapons made of wood and stone. They screamed as they fought. When their weapons broke, they used their hands. When their hands were injured, they used their teeth. I saw a human with both legs shattered, bones sticking through skin, crawling toward his enemy through the mud. He was still trying to fight. Still trying to kill? Korath's mandibles clicked so fast, they blurred. But that was not the worst part. The worst part was their faces. They were smiling, laughing, they were enjoying it. Violence was not just a tool for them. It was entertainment. It was sport. They killed each other with joy in their hearts. In the council room, High Chancellor Zorvath's compound eyes had gone very still. He was beginning to understand what Vrax had been trying to tell them. The battle ended after several hours, Korath continued. The survivors gathered their wounded and their dead. I expected them to leave, to return to their camps and rest. Instead, they did something I will never understand. His voice cracked with emotion. They walked to the middle of the battlefield. The two leaders met between the bodies of the fallen, and they talked. They exchanged tokens and gestures. They laughed together. One of them produced a container of liquid, and they shared it, passing it back and forth. Korath stared directly into the recorder. They had just spent hours trying to murder each other. They had lost friends and family in the fighting, and now they were drinking together like old companions. I realized then that humans do not experience violence the way other species do. For them, it is normal, natural. They can kill you in the morning and share a meal with you at night.
Ow.
The recording jumped again. Now Korath was in a different setting, cleaner, brighter. He was still speaking, but his voice had changed. It was softer now, confused. They found me. I thought I was dead, but they did not kill me. They brought me to their village and gave me food. Cooked meat from animals they had hunted. They tried to communicate through gestures and sounds. They laughed at my appearance, but not with cruelty. They were curious, fascinated. They wanted to understand me. His eyes glistened with moisture. I was injured. My thorax had been punctured by debris from a fall. A human female noticed this. She was young, perhaps in the early stages of her adult life. Without hesitation, she tore strips from her own clothing. She cleaned my wound with a clear liquid that burned like fire. Then she wrapped the injury with the cloth and secured it tightly. Korath's voice became very quiet. It saved my life. An alien creature she had never seen before. She spent her own resources, risked her own health, to help me. When I asked her why, through crude gestures, she pointed at my chest. Then at her own. She was telling me that we were the same, that my life had value equal to hers. He straightened in his seat, and when he spoke again, his voice was filled with something between terror and wonder. They are monsters. They are saints. They can destroy everything you love in one moment and heal your wounds in the next. They are the most dangerous species I have ever encountered. Not because of their strength or their weapons or their technology, but because they never give up. They never stop. They never surrender. And somehow, despite all the violence in their nature, they are capable of kindness that defies logic. The recording ended. The holographic image of Private Korath faded away, leaving only silence in the War Council room. General Vrax stood in the darkness, his ancient eyes watching the faces of the council members. He could see their fear now. He could see them beginning to understand. But understanding was not enough, not yet. There was more they needed to know, much more. The silence in the council room lasted for a long time. General Vrax allowed it to stretch, watching the faces of the Empire's greatest military leaders. He could see doubt creeping into their expressions. Good doubt was the first step toward wisdom. Finally, High Chancellor Zorvath spoke. His voice was quieter than before, less certain. This is one soldier's experience from over a century ago. Humans were primitive then. Perhaps they have become more civilized now. Civilized. Vrax let out a sound that might have been laughter. Let me tell you about civilized humanity. He walked back to the holographic display and began calling up new images. Charts and graphs appeared, showing population growth and territorial expansion. Maps displayed human colonies spreading across dozens of star systems like a growing stain. In 300 years, they have gone from 1 planet to 67 colonies. Their population has grown from 8 billion to 150 billion. They have developed faster than light travel independently, something that only the founders of our empire ever achieved. And they did all of this while fighting among themselves. Intelligence Director Naxith leaned forward. Fighting among themselves? You mean civil conflicts? Constant conflict? Vrax confirmed. In the 3 centuries since they discovered spaceflight, they have fought 3 civil wars, two religious conflicts, and something they casually refer to as the resource troubles. Millions of them died in these internal struggles. And yet their civilization did not fall. It grew stronger. He pulled up another image, showing human soldiers in various types of armor and uniforms. Their military is entirely volunteer. They choose to fight. They compete for the privilege of serving in their armed forces. Their soldiers undergo training that would kill half of our recruits. They break bones, tear muscles, push themselves past every limit, and they call this preparation. Admiral Yelthin hissed softly. Madness. Survival, Vrax corrected. Their world made them this way. Earth is not just a Category 12 death world. It is a constantly changing nightmare. The climate shifts between extremes. The ground shakes and splits open. Mountains explode with liquid fire. Waves taller than buildings sweep across their coastlines. And through all of this, the humans adapted. They did not just survive. They conquered their own planet. He began to pace slowly around the table, his old joints creaking with each step. Do you know what they do for entertainment? They climb mountains so tall that the air becomes too thin to breathe. They jump from aircraft and fall toward the ground, trusting small pieces of fabric to save them at the last moment. They swim in oceans filled with creatures that could eat them in a single bite. They call this fun. General Morvik snorted. Self-destructive behavior. Surely this is a weakness we can exploit. It is not self-destruction. It is practice. Vrax stopped pacing and faced Morvik directly. They train themselves to face fear. They deliberately seek out danger so that when real threats appear, they are ready. Their entire species is built around the concept of overcoming challenges. The harder you push them, the stronger they become. He returned to the holographic display and called up historical records. 6 centuries ago, a disease swept across their planet. It killed 40% of their population. Entire cities were emptied. Their civilization nearly collapsed. Do you know what happened next? He paused, looking around the table. They rebuilt. In less than 2 centuries, they had not only recovered, but exceeded their previous level of development. They call this period the Renaissance. It means rebirth. High Chancellor Zorvath's mandibles clicked nervously. Impressive recovery. But surely I am not finished. Less than a century ago, they fought their largest war. 2 groups of nations, hundreds of millions of soldiers, weapons that could destroy entire cities in a single blast. They killed nearly 100 million of each other over the course of just 6 years. The number hung in the air, terrible and impossible. 100 million deaths in 6 years? It was genocide on a scale that most species could not imagine. And then Vrax continued, less than 50 years after this war ended. The nations that had been trying to destroy each other became allies, trading partners. They exchanged students and cultural programs. They married each other's citizens. They formed military alliances to protect one another. He let that sink in before continuing. This is what humans do. They fight with everything they have, with hatred and fury that burns like a star. And then, when the fighting is over, they forgive. They rebuild. They move forward. Their capacity for violence is matched only by their capacity for reconciliation. Vrax walked to the center of the room and stood directly in front of High Chancellor Zorvath. If you go to war with humanity, this is what will happen. You will burn their colonies. They will rebuild. You will destroy their fleets. They will build more. You will kill their soldiers. Their civilians will pick up weapons and keep fighting. You will bomb their cities. The survivors will dig shelters and continue resisting. His voice dropped low, filled with the weight of centuries of experience. You will push them to the brink of extinction. You will have them cornered, outnumbered, outgunned. And they will look up at you with blood on their faces and fire in their eyes. And they will laugh. Because to a human, a hopeless situation is not a defeat. It is a challenge. It is an opportunity to prove themselves. Their greatest heroes come from their darkest moments. General Vrax turned and walked slowly toward the door. I have commanded armies for 400 years. I have never refused a mission. I have never abandoned a campaign. But I will not lead your fleets against humanity. Not because I fear death. Death holds no terror for an old soldier. But because I know what will happen, I stopped at the door and looked back at the council. You will win the first battles. Perhaps the first campaigns. You will think you are winning. And then, slowly, you will realize the truth. They are learning, adapting, getting stronger with every defeat. Their weapons will improve. Their tactics will evolve. And one day, not in my lifetime, but perhaps in yours, they will come for you. His 6 ancient eyes swept across every face in the room. They will hunt down every world that belongs to the Empire. They will track every ship that carries our flag. They will teach their children to hate us. They will write songs about our destruction. And they will never, ever stop. Not until the last Valkorian is dead and the last trace of our civilization has been wiped from the galaxy. Svrax opened the door. Or, he said quietly, you could try something the Empire has never attempted in 12,000 years of existence. He paused in the doorway. You could try making friends. And then he was gone, leaving the council to sit in stunned silence, confronting a truth that none of them had ever imagined. The Empire had conquered 47 species. They had ruled this part of the galaxy for millennia. They had never met an enemy they could not defeat until now. The council room remained silent for a long time after General Vrax departed. The holographic displays still showed images of human soldiers, human cities, human ships. Data about their military strength and population growth filled the screens. But now, all of it looked different. High Chancellor Zorvith was the first to speak. His voice was quiet, almost hesitant. The general has served the Empire with distinction for 4 centuries. He has never been wrong about military matters. He is old, General Morvik said, but his voice lacked conviction. Perhaps his judgment is affected by age. Perhaps Admiral Yelthin replied slowly, he sees what we cannot. He has experienced things that we have only read about in reports. His instincts have kept him alive through 100 campaigns. Intelligence Director Naxith was reviewing data on his screen. His many Yes blinked rapidly as he processed information. I have been examining the classified files that General Vrax mentioned. They are authentic. The survey team incident happened exactly as he described. And there is more. He projected new images onto the central display. Videos of human activity collected by spy drones and long-range observers over the past several decades. Watch this, Naxith said. The screen showed a human city that had been struck by a natural disaster. Buildings were collapsed, streets were flooded, fires burned in multiple locations. It looked like the aftermath of a military bombardment. This happened 30 years ago on one of their colony worlds, Naxith explained. A geological event destroyed nearly half the city. Over 10,000 humans died in the initial disaster. The video continued, showing the same city days later. Humans were working everywhere. They dug through rubble with their bare hands, pulling out survivors. They carried wounded on stretchers. They organized supply lines and medical stations. Some of them had not slept for days. Their eyes were hollow with exhaustion, but they kept working. Within 1 week, they had rescued every survivor, Naxith said. Within 1 month, they had cleared the debris. Within 1 year, they had rebuilt the city. Not just restored it, but improved it. The new construction was stronger, more resistant to future disasters. He changed the image again. This time it showed a human hospital. Its facility treats patients from multiple species, humans, but also aliens from races they have encountered in their expansion. Some of these species were initially hostile. The humans fought wars against them, and now they share medical facilities. They save each other's lives. High Chancellor Zorveth leaned forward, his compound eyes fixed on the screen. They heal their enemies? They do more than that. Naxith pulled up another file. 3 decades ago, a human colony ship encountered a Thrivix vessel in distress. The Thrivix, as you may recall, had attacked human traders the previous year, killed several dozen humans. Started a brief but violent conflict. The screen showed a human ship docking with the damaged Thrivix vessel. The humans boarded the Thrivix ship and repaired their life support systems. They shared their food and water. They towed the Thrivix vessel to the nearest safe port. When asked why they helped an enemy, the human captain said something that our translators struggled to interpret. Seth read from his notes. He said, they needed help. That was all that mattered in that moment. The council members exchanged uncertain glances. This did not match their understanding of how intelligent species behaved. You helped allies and destroyed enemies. That was the natural order of things. There is one more thing, Naxith said. Perhaps the most important detail of all? He displayed a graph showing human territorial expansion over the past 3 centuries. It was a steady growth curve, not aggressive or explosive, but consistent. The humans have encountered 43 different alien species during their expansion. They fought military conflicts with 11 of them. Do you know how many of those species they destroyed? Silence. None. Naxith let the word hang in the air. Not one. Every species that went to war with humanity still exists. Several of them are now close allies. They trade with humans, share technology, even intermarry when biologically compatible. Admiral Yelthin made a sound of disbelief. They spare their enemies. Every single time. They do more than spare them. They integrate them. They find common ground. They build relationships. Nexeth turned off his display. General Vrax was right. The humans are not simply warriors. They are something far more complex, and perhaps far more dangerous, but not in the way we assumed. High Chancellor Zorveth rose from his seat and walked to the window. Outside, the stars shone cold and distant. Somewhere among them, human ships were traveling. Human colonies were growing, human children were being born and raised to explore the universe, and the Empire has survived for 12,000 years, Zorveth said slowly. We have conquered and assimilated 47 species. Our power is unmatched in this part of the galaxy. He paused, his mandibles clicking softly. But power alone does not ensure survival. Adaptability does. He turned to face the council. The humans adapt. That is their greatest strength. They face challenges, and they change. They grow. They become something new. His voice grew firmer. Perhaps it is time for the Empire to adapt as well. General Morvik shifted his massive bulk. You are suggesting we abandon the war plan? I am suggesting we consider an alternative. Zorveth returned to his seat at the head of the table. For 12,000 years, we have known only one way to deal with other species: domination. But domination creates resentment, fear, the species we have conquered. Serve us because they have no choice, not because they wish to. He looked around the table, meeting each pair of eyes in turn. What if we tried the human way? What if we approached them not as conquerors, but as potential partners? Not as rulers, but as equals. The idea hung in the air, strange and uncomfortable. It went against everything the Empire had ever done. It challenged the fundamental assumptions that had guided their civilization for millennia. But no one spoke against it, because they were all thinking the same thing. They were thinking about Private Korith, saved by a human female who gained nothing from the act. They were thinking about human cities rebuilt after disasters, human enemies transformed into allies, human soldiers who laughed in the face of death and then shared drinks with their opponents. They were thinking about what it might mean to have such a species, as an ally instead of an enemy. Summon the diplomatic corps, Zorveth said finally. Prepare a message for the human government. Tell them that the Valkorian Empire wishes to discuss terms of friendship. The order was given. The council members filed out of the room, each one lost in thought, each one wondering what the future might hold. 3 days later, a diplomatic vessel departed from Nexus Station, carrying the first official communication between the Valkorian Empire and humanity. The message was simple and direct. It spoke of mutual respect, of shared interests, of the possibility of cooperation between two great civilizations. When the humans received it, they did exactly what General Vrax had predicted. They laughed, and then they welcomed the Empire with open arms, because that was what humans did. They made friends of enemies. They found family among strangers. They built bridges where others saw only walls. Their capacity for violence was terrifying, but their capacity for connection was even greater. In his quarters aboard Nexus Station, General Vrax received word of the human response. He read the message 3 times, his ancient eyes taking in every word. A human ambassador was being sent. Negotiations would begin within days, for the first time in over a century. "Yeah?" The old general smiled. He had fought wars across half the galaxy. He had watched civilizations rise and fall. He had seen horrors beyond imagination and victories beyond description. But this, perhaps, would be his greatest achievement. Not the conquest of an enemy, but the creation of an ally. Somewhere in the void between stars, two civilizations were taking their first steps toward something new, something unprecedented, something that might change the galaxy forever. And it had all started with a warning from an old soldier who had learned to fear the right things. Outside the station windows, stars continued to shine. The universe continued to spin. And in the hearts of beings across 1,000 worlds, hope began to grow. The war that everyone expected never happened. Instead, something better was born. A friendship between monsters and saints, and the galaxy would never be the same again.